Thank you all for coming. We're going to do this in English because we have English speakers tonight, and it would be easier for everyone to follow if we speak in English. If anyone doesn't understand English, raise your hand, and I'm not sure we'll find a solution. So thank you for coming. It is the first time we have so many people in this place since the end of COVID. COVID is not over, but since we are back to almost normal, so thank you for coming. And this is going to be a very exciting topic because it's a topic that a lot of us lived through in our everyday life. We live in the middle of the mountains, in front of the lake, in an environment where we are exposed to the beauty of nature all the time. And a lot of us, if not all of us, have experienced leadership in times of crisis. And so tonight what we will discuss is leadership in times of crisis and how it's a different type of leadership. It's a leadership where you can make no mistake. It's a leadership where you have to lead people, and you have to lead them in a situation where if you drop the ball, I'm going to be a bit dramatic, but they could die. And we will take examples of situations where it's as bad as this. We'll also talk about a kind of leadership that is natural, that you don't claim. It comes to you because you earned it, and you don't ask to be given that leadership. You just take a group with you. And this is why the mountain will be very important, and we'll come back to this. It's a leadership very often that we forge through life events and experiences. It doesn't just fall on you like this, or if some of us are gifted, lucky them, but most of us, we've lived experiences, we've lived life events that helped us get into that position and know how to drive groups. Publicis, because we are a Publicis Group in Lausanne, is the perfect example of a company that survived crisis not once but twice. Publicis was created between the two world wars by Marcel Bleustein-Blanchet, Marcel Bleustein-Blanchet, a French Jew, during the Second World War had to run away, went to London, and became a resistant. And so he survived the war as a Jew and as a resistant to come back and relaunch Publicis from nowhere. And it became the leading French agency all the way to the 70s, where one night the building burned to the ground. Suddenly, burned to the ground. It means that there was a risk that nothing was left overnight. One person in this agency had the lucidity to go through the fire into the file rooms and save, in a fraction of a second, all the files that allowed the agency to recover all its accounts, all its billables, everything that was needed in order to claim the money that it needed and to pay the people it needed to pay. Otherwise, the agency would have died, because there was absolutely no file left. It was that building on the Champs-Élysées that some of you might know that went down to the ground. Second time the agency survived a major crisis. Since then, our industry went through crisis and crisis. We survived, but everybody else survived. So there's nothing special to this. So that's about Publicis. Myself, I grew up in a country at war, in a situation where you have to improvise every day how you live through life, how you live your experiences. And personally, I had overnight to move from being a simple 17-year-old scout to joining the Lebanese Red Cross and having on the battlefield to drive an ambulance and take people from the battleground to hospitals, not knowing what were their injuries, sometimes were the hospitals, and whether the ambulance was going to be shot or not. And so those are situations where you should not think. Just get that body in the ambulance with the help of the others, drive that ambulance under the bullets to a hospital, and no questions. Otherwise, you just don't move. So we will go through the experiences of Andrea, Blaise, and Charlotte in a second. But what united us when we met, I think, I first met Charlotte. Then through Charlotte I met Blaise, and through Blaise and Charlotte I met Andrea. What we realized is that we are all united by one thing. We all lived very, very tricky experiences where we had to lead, and we should not ask questions, or we should lead without letting room for questions. And again, dropping the ball would have been a disaster. And we felt that that experience we're sharing, and the one thing that unites us, I spoke about war, but also mountain, in my case, where I always had to, in my life, take a step back and try to go up there in the mountain in the beginning without really knowing where where I was going and how I was doing it. But slowly but surely in life, meeting people like Blaise, I learned how to get up there in the mountain, and actually you always learn, you never stop learning. But the mountain is what united us, because Andrea, you're a Himalayan, you're also a lawyer who works for the Tribunal Arbitral du Sport, and you're an ex-ski mountaineering champion, and so the mountain is something you know really well. I said Blaise would be second. Blaise, you're the ex-boss of the brigade,
Mountain Rescue Team.
Mountain Rescue Team in Chamonix, yeah. And you also went in intervention in different countries in situations of crisis. And Charlotte, you lead Morgan Phillips, a headhunting company in Geneva, but you were in Nepal when the earthquake in Nepal happened, and you had to improvise and survive and help as well. So maybe Andrea, maybe you will go first and you will start talking to us about your experiences and how you experienced that leadership in the death zone in Himalaya, where that's a perfect example of a place where you can make no mistake. One thing about the discussion tonight, we will talk, but then we would love to talk to you. Blaise calls it une conversation de refuge. It's not formal. If you want to raise your hand and ask a question, please do. And if I want to ask you a question, I will. Same and same. C'est une conversation de refuge. It's as if we were up in the mountain in front of a firehouse, and after a good day up there in the winter. Andrea.
Thank you so much, and good evening to everyone. So you choose to start with me, so we will immediately go a little bit higher up in altitude. So we are, I think, at the last floor here, but we will go a little bit higher. It's true that I had an amazing, or the chance and privilege to have an amazing experience in the Himalaya. First of all, I'm married with a Sherpa, so this is really my family name. And he was leading on the highest summit on the earth for decades. And I had the chance to stand with him together more than 1.5 hours on the top of the earth, actually, on Mount Everest. But to come there and to feel this death zone, as you say, because it's really, you are there, it's black or white. There is absolutely no gray zone. But to go there, we had actually to struggle. And this is what actually we have a very common point with Charlotte tonight, is that we got stuck 2 kilometers from the epicenter of 7.8 of this terrible earthquake in 2015 in Nepal. And this was actually on our way to go to base camp, the first time that we tried to attempt Mount Everest. But it was another Everest, and then we climbed. And also in this kind of situations, we had actually to adapt and be flexible, as you have to be in the mountains. So in 2015, our Everest was actually to provide supplies to villages in very remote areas, feeling the aftershakes of the earthquake, just be happy to survive. In 2016, finally, we had the chance to realize this real Mount Everest. And maybe there was one point, because you have to think, when you're up there, your brain is just working a little bit slower than it is working here. And sometimes I was even testing myself by saying 1 + 1, how much it makes. It looks very funny, and afterwards when I'm thinking of it, it's quite funny too, but I can really tell you, after having read, all these books where you know the stories of the Himalayan tragedies, etc. And suddenly you are there in this place. We had experience. Now, I went for several other 8,000 meets before, because I really wanted to be ready for Everest. But when you have these stories in mind, and suddenly you are there on this small ridge, you see the top of Mount Everest, but it's night. It's still night. It's full moon, but it's night, and you know that you go very, very slowly. When I tell you very slowly, you make 10 steps. If you can make 15 and then you make a break, that's a lot. This is, again, you have to be flexible. As a former athlete, you have to accept that you are not so fast, and you have to accept this frustration of going slowly and to tell to your husband, but I'm really not in good shape, don't you think so? And then he's saying, no, but look behind you, we are actually on the first line. And then you arrive at 3:45 on the top of Mount Everest. It's black. The night, it's just night. You said, wow, I could have stayed at home and make a picture from one of our summits. It would have been same, actually. But no, and we are up there, and you have your husband. It was the 7th time that he was up there, and he tells you very calmly that, you know, the weather conditions are perfect, so let's stay for the sunrise. And then you know that your brain is lacking of oxygen, and you're on the top of the world. And you say, wow, I've never been there. I have read all the tragedies. I don't know how my body will react. What you do in this kind of situations? You're a team. So you have to trust. And I had a blind trust in my husband, because I knew exactly that at this point, he's the boss. I will not negotiate more. And we got the chance actually to enjoy a sunrise that it's, yeah, the only word I can say is it's just magical. And it was magical. And you are up there alone. So sometimes you see some shadows coming to people, a flash, the picture made, and then again you turn around, there is nobody. So this privilege is something that is based on trust. And maybe just before, and that's also one time where the decision happened. We were at 8:3, so you rest at the last camp, a few hours before the summit push. You are in your tent. You can imagine that at 8:3 you are not playing cards and drinking a beer and whatever, so you're just waiting, the time is passing that you can go for your summit push. We had planned to go at 9:30, between 9:30 and 9:45. We had our weather report, which was perfect, so we knew that we had 4 days in a row where the weather was good to go up and come down, because most of the accidents actually are happening when you go down. And suddenly, at 5:30, you hear on the tent, you say, shit, what's this now? I'm sorry for the word, but it was really up there, you have really this kind of a reaction. It was snowing. But we got the weather reports that the weather was good. So what you do again, you are at 8:3, you know that you are in this famous death zone, that you cannot stay longer. If you stay one more night, I would not be here to talk about it. So we took the satellite phone, and my husband just made a message to our weatherman. He's a professional weatherman that we have hired for the expedition. He asked what we do. How is the weather actually? What are the forecasts? He replied in only few words. It will snow till midnight, slightly snow, and then the weather is good again. You are at 8:3. What you do? Are you going to trust somebody who is not besides you, who has no idea? We were in Tibet, because we did it from Tibet side. He's in Nepal. But you know he's a professional. We said, okay, we trust. At 9:30, when we opened the tent, we had the stars and the full moon. And that was then our ascent. So that's just the part, because I could talk to tomorrow morning, so maybe I'll stop here, but I'm really happy to answer questions.
One question. When you said, while you were up at the summit and you stayed 1 hour and a half, you said at the summit, I'm not going to ask you if you had oxygen or not. My question is, you spoke about flashes. Were these people going up, taking pictures and then leaving while you were staying up there?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Because my husband, he told me, listen, the sunrise is something so amazing from up there, and it's really as if you would be in a plane, actually. You see, you cannot go higher, actually. And that was also funny, because I'm somebody quite emotional, and my husband was expecting also that when I'm arriving up there, it would be, you know...
Happiness.
Exactly. And I was so focused on the downhill, because we were taking actually the more technical route to go up. And I knew that we had to pass some people going down. And you are in a kind of via ferrata, but you have 3,500 meters just, you know, the cliff. So I was so focused on this that he was also a little bit surprised. And then he said, but at a certain point he said, but you know where we are finally? Because you cannot go higher, otherwise you go to the moon. I said, yeah, no, but you know, we will have to go down.
So what you're saying is the summit is not the summit.
Exactly. As long as you are not at base camp, you haven't done your expedition. And you cannot say that you have succeeded. Yeah. So you still have to stay focused, to go down. And he was at a certain point, he said, listen, what we're going to see is something so exceptional. You can see it only a few minutes during the day. It's actually the pyramid of Mount Everest reflecting on the mountains of Nepal. And it lasts just a few. And why he knew this? He was experienced, and he had this expertise to be able to know that I was prepared well enough to be able to stay there as long as it will last, actually, and then that we have the chance to see this, and we saw it.
Well,
so, yeah.
Well, that inspires me a question to you, Blaise. As a mountain guide, knowing that more and more people now go up there, because it's easier than ever to get up there. When you hear the summit is not the summit, and I completely agree that when you get up there, you still have to go down, to come down, and so until you're back, you don't know. How, going back to leadership, as a guide and as a leader, when people become too euphoric when they get up and consider that it's over, and they can become, they can start being a little less prudent on the way back down, etc. How do you manage the situation? How do you rein them in?
You're too nervous.
You survive as your client. No, no, it's not an easy question. In fact, perhaps I just want to small commentary about the summit. Of course, the summit is when you are down the mountain, but your summit this day was the sunrise. And sometimes we expect to achieve something as a physical summit. And in fact, the sunrise could happen even in a smallest mountain. But we prefer to achieve something physical. I don't know why. It's a humankind thinking. But we have to look at this question first before starting any climbing. But if you don't talk to your client or to your partner or to your rope team where we are going and why we are going there, of course it will be very hard to go down. So one question in the back of your question is the fact that you cannot look at the question of leadership, going back to the mountain when people are exhausted. No, it's before. Before starting, you have to describe the whole project and to know that when you will reach the summit, it will be 1/3 of the action according to the commitment and the action you have to provide to go down to the mountain, because you will be exhausted and you will have no goals. Because going to the base camp is not a goal. So it's very hard to go down. And when you go to the Mont Blanc, which is a small Everest nearby, it's always the same story. Everybody is focused to achieve the summit, or the sunrise, depending on the people. And then we have to go down. And it's very, very long way down. And people are so boring about that. And of course, then the accident happens. So how you create this tension inside the rope team. It's a tension you have to create, but it's a wording tension. As a mountain guide, you use your word to put the tension in the rope team to take care for everybody. And I used to say that when we lead with a rope, with some technical gears and so on, but we lead with the word first. And of course, sometimes you let the wording a little with more space to let people be just like that, to have fun, taking picture, and then you know that you have to take the attention on what happened on the ridge, small ridge, when you have to cross the corridor going down to the Mont Blanc, for example, and then with your word, you take the pressure over your team positively. Mm.
So communication.
So a lot of communication, yes.
Do you have a story?
Yeah. Of course, communication is something very important.
Maybe just one small detail to add of an anecdote up there on the downhill, actually, exactly on the descent. we knew that we cannot sleep, and we wanted to do it as fast as possible. So we were quite fast going then till down base camp. So you are tired, you drink nothing, you eat nothing. In 24 hours I drank 2.5 deciliter. So you can imagine in which kind of physical shape you are. And then going down, you have this in mind that you cannot stop to sleep, otherwise you sleep forever. So it's this dimension. And the words at that point, some of the words are still stuck in me, because I had my small nephew on the phone. He was 5 years old. It can less funny, but still remember his words. I could call my brother to tell him where we are, and we were at 7-8 going down. And my small nephew wanted to come on the phone, and he just he said hi, and then he said nothing else, and I said, do you know where your auntie is? And he said, yes, and he took a very serious voice, and still now, I really, I had a goose shit on the skin almost when I'm thinking of it. And you were there, you were sitting, you were feeling good actually. We said, I could take a rest. And then he was saying, yes, you're at Everest. And then he was really saying, Bravo, bravo, bravo. And then suddenly he said, but you're going to come back with Norbo. And then you are, yeah, of course I'm going to come back. And then the whole downhill, and it was still long. I had a small voice in my head, in my mind, just motivating. And this is a small word, it's not even, but it's something pushes you, to stay focused and to know that you have to further be concentrated. That's just one anecdote that I...
It's very important point, because to create such anchor, if we are talking about leadership, it's a way that it's not some basic activity as a manager, so I will put some KPI on the team to say you will succeed, camp 1, 2, 3, the summit, go down. So it's not the way that we manage people. We have to manage people like the nephew, your nephew. It's to put the right word at the right time in the right head. Not so easy, because it's a kind of mentalism, kind of mental management of the team. But if you say something to someone in the wrong timeline, okay, you told me I want to be happy, and you say you have to be sad. No, I want to be happy, but you have to be sad. No, so of course to have the right, so it's kind of synchronicity of the attitude
right
of
message
the leader.
at the right time.
And it's you have to be very sensitive to a lot of weak signals in your team. So as a mountain guide, we try. It's not a perfect action of leadership. Of course, we are humans. We do, and we will do for a long time some mistakes. And you say no mistakes. So it's hard to say no mistakes when we are human. So there is something to solve in your question, and the way that I think we have to talk about that after that. But the way that you take the right position, it's a very difficult aspect of guiding in the mountain, because you have to support, you have to create the right ecosystem to take the right decision, which is, for me, the main things. In fact, for your question, is how we build, as a leader of a company, as a head of something, how you build the right ecosystem, because you will not drive your business with your husband every day. Like you have a high level of commitment and confidence because he's your husband. But when you are at work, you are not with your husband every day. And you have to develop
That's a very interesting point, because this takes me to Charlotte. So, when building a team, my conviction is that a team, the perfect team, is not like what the Paris Saint-Germain, for example, does in football, buying very expensive people and putting them together, and expecting that they can win the Ligue des Champions. It didn't work until now, and it won't work. So, in your job, how do you, and let's find an analogy with la cordée. When you build a cordée, how do you make sure you're building a team of people that will complement each other and not fight with each other or not try to eat one another?
Well, I think you never know, and you're never sure that this is the right rope with the right members, with the right guide, etc. So, and I think that because I fully agree with Blaise, it's also a question of of momentum, it's a question of mindset, it's a question of environment, and it's never the same. You know, it's changing not every day, but nearly every day. Like, you know, in the mountains, it's changing all the times, like every minute, every second. And I think that in your business, daily life, it's changing all the time because it depends of your P&L. It depends of if you win a competition. It depends of also your mindset. It depends of the new talent you have just onboarded, and it depends of your competitors. So it depends of everything all the time. So definitely, it's about it's accept the things. I think this is my key word, and it's also about agility. Not agility like I'm agile. No, it's not like this. It's I have the right behavior and the right attitude towards this situation. So I don't know if you have the perfect team. Maybe on the Monday it's right, but on the Tuesday.
So what you're saying is the truth of today might not be the truth of tomorrow.
It's
A
about
good leader will
imbalance.
know how to reevaluate and reassess and redeploy.
Yeah, and I think that this is what I learned from Montaigne, and of course during this earthquake, it's like, I don't know, I never know, and I don't know anything. It's not, okay, I don't know anything, so I'm gonna jump, but I'm not like 100% and 1000% confident. It's like, I know that I know a few things, but let's see what's happening, so. You disagree?
Not totally, but a little bit. But just to have the discussion, because we are at the refuge, we need to fight a little. No, but I think it's, of course, we have to accept uncertainty. Of course, it's the beginning of the story. But if you just accept,
you also have to fight.
You have to fight too.
You have to fight.
So it's a kind of attitude we have to. And if I'm talking about mountain rescue, because it was my job in a long time. Of course, you have to prepare your team to not to accept, to fight. Because if you are a mountain rescue team and you say, okay, I accept that people are falling down.
I don't accept. You see, I don't accept things like this.
No, I'm teasing just to tease. But in fact, what I want to say is acceptance is a very important piece, because you can lose people in your team because we have such event in this unit, and in the mountain we lose a lot of people. Probably you are living here around, so you practice mountain, you know people who die in the mountain. So we have to accept the risk. But then how we build the ability of the team to face in a very efficient way this uncertain world and complexity of the daily life today. Because with Ukraine, with COVID and so on, we have a big push of uncertainty in our environment. So this is my question.
Yeah, I know, thank you, Blaise.
So how do you build a kind of framework of something that could help people in charge of different responsibilities to be more efficient, even when you don't know too much, the weather, etc.
Thank you.
A question to Charlotte, because...
I have 2 questions.
One more.
One more.
A question to Charlotte. So, uncertainty, you don't always know. I agree with you. And you know that you will be in situations sometimes where where you won't have all the keys. So I remember one day you had a post about sophrology or visualization,
something like this.
or something like this. And so one of the ways to lead is to have scenarios in your head and anticipate. Those are the 3 different ways the situation could unfold. And let me think about those 3 different ways, and let me think about how I could act if it goes this way or that way or that way. You won't have the answer, obviously, but you will have scenarios, and that way, when the situation happens, you will have prepared those scenarios in your head. That way, you're not totally improvising. Although you don't, I agree with you again, you don't know everything, but you've thought about it. So, are there examples you've been through where you had to prepare by preparing scenarios different? So, for example, you plan on summiting, but you know that the weather window is such that you might not be able to summit. So, when do you decide when to start going back down?
Exactly. This is a very, very good question, because we were always very, very strict, and we are still now. We are organizing these expeditions also. This is a no discussion, actually. It's until a certain time. If you haven't reached this point, you have to turn back. And whatever happens, whatever you have paid, whatever you have done, it is just you have to turn back. And for this, yeah, we are very strict. And I see, for example, my husband, who was really a leader up there, he had to turn back with some people 200 meters from the summit. And it happened to me in 2019. I went for another 8,000 meter peak. And everything was perfect, the weather was perfect, we were in good shape, etc., etc. We were just not in the good timing, in the right timing, because it has snowed during the night. We were the only expedition up there at the last camp. There was a huge plateau. My husband would say it's flat, but I can tell you it's not flat. And then we had actually to make the track. So you can imagine at this altitude without oxygen to make the track, it takes you a huge energy. And at a certain point, we just saw the time was passing, We were at 150 meters from the summit elevation. So still it's more than, it's almost 2 hours going. But that means that we were not in this, thank you so much. We were not in the right timing at this point. Of course, we could have done it. The weather was good. We were in good shape. But no, up there you just don't take the risk because it was getting colder. You never know if the weather can change in 1 second or not. Sure, the weather forecast was okay. But end of the day in the Himalaya, the weather is always changing. So 150 meters before the summit, we just said, no, we turned back. I can tell you that's kind of a decision that up there you have to face actually. But that's it. It's a no return. And today I'm here. I have all my toes. I have all my fingers. I'm happy to be here and share my experience with you. I don't know yes or no, but up there you cannot say yes or no. It's black or white, and you have to take the decision. So
in the mountain rescue, it's what you say about scenarization. It's the core of how you build the skill of the team. You can imagine every scenario. So first there is a lessons learned process. So after every operation we do the lessons learned to understand what happened, what we did wrong, what did we do correctly, and then we adapt. And if you visit, if you have the time one day to visit the helicopter base in Chamonix, it's open if you want. It's open. Not as a bar, but if you ask for, you can visit that. But it's very interesting because if you enter in this drop zone, this area, everything is prepared for different case of situation. In fact, if you have a rescue on the paragliders, on the wire, on the cable, on the electrical wire, for example, there is already the bag with everything to manage this situation. Crevasse, for example, you have the kit is prepared. So in just 1 second, the team takes the bag, and you have everything to face the situation. It's a very, very short cutter of time. So it's scenarization for a long time. For now, it's 60 years of activity in Chamonix with the gendarmerie. So it's a military organization. So you can capitalize on the behavior, on the training, and you have the school and so on. So it's organized. But the way to build that is scenarization. We try to imagine everything, and when we do something wrong, we correct and we adapt. So it's one big piece of when we talk about leadership in uncertainty. This way is a very, very important piece. And the second one for me, I used to talk about that. Sometimes it's difficult to explain exactly what is it, but you have the book, perhaps we will understand after the book, but I'm not sure, so you will see. It's what I call mental model. We used to manage a project with process. So you start with a kickoff, you have it's a project management behavior which is common. And you can manage your team like that, or you can manage your team with mental model, which is to have some box of action you have to do when you face a crisis. For example, there are six boxes to face a crisis, which is whatever it's a crisis, which is a cyber attack, which is a natural disaster or whatever, you have these 6 boxes. And you will adapt to each situation, of course, but you know that facing a crisis, you need to do these 6 actions in a certain way. So if you know before the crisis that there are 6 boxes to fill, it's easier than to improvise 1 box, 2 boxes. No. So the mental model is to create in each different kinds of activity, in your activity, kind of universal essentials you have to do facing a kind of situation. So it's hard to, because it's a kind of theorization starting from the ground, and then you can go back to the ground, which kind of a framework of the thinking.
So to bring it back to a very pragmatic, just a second, a very pragmatic way we operate as an agency here, we are very constantly invited to pitch for new clients. And the pitch model that works if we decide to be ready early enough in order to rehearse, and rehearse a lot. Because in rehearsals, you will ask all the tough questions that will come in a meeting where you cannot improvise an answer. And in rehearsals, that will go terribly wrong in the beginning. The first rehearsal is generally a disaster. Robert is smiling in the back, but because he knows what I'm talking. It can be a disaster because all the pieces don't fit. Second rehearsal will be a bit better, third rehearsal a bit better, and at the end, the rehearsal might not, none of the rehearsals might be perfect, but you will shine when you're in the situation because you've already asked all the difficult questions, like you've already looked at the different scenarios, and there's less room for improvisation. This means that sometimes what looks like a creative with talent in a creative presentation is actually not someone who's just relying on talent, but someone who relied on a lot of work and a lot of rehearsals in order to then give the impression he's being a clown as a creative in the meeting, but having rehearsed every single word he's saying. And that element is important in everything we do as leaders. We are well prepared if we have prepared all the scenarios and rehearsed all the scenarios. And we are not giving the person in front of us the impression that, oof, I'm caught off guard, I have no idea what I will answer, I will tap dance my answer, and inshallah. That's not a good way to lead, and that's clearly not a good way to lead in the mountains. Carol?
So we talk about communication, and I have a question for you. Blaise, do you have a special type or style of communication? Because, I mean, I understand, and I understand also your story of your husband on the top. So, and does your husband have a special style of communication? Because I understand that you can prepare yourself, but then you have a team. So how do you prepare your team so you can still prepare? But then when you face the crisis or the difficulty or whatever, then it's difficult, but people react their own way. So how do you motivate them if they're scared, if they're... So do you have a special communication style or tips or your own style?
You talk too loud to me because there is a combination of my husband. I don't know.
Your style when you're like a guy in the mountains.
So she will answer too, but my small answer is first, you have to be quiet on the non-verbal attitude, which is if you as a leader, it's not so easy. But the non-verbal is 80% of the impact over people. If you say, I am totally confident of everything in the perfect world, like you know some Macron, no, but you know everything is perfect, even if there is a big earthquake in the back of your screen. You are talking in front of the screen. So non-verbal is a very important one. So we have to take care because we cannot lie with the body. We can lie with the word, but we cannot lie with the body. So we have to learn how we can manage our body to have a non-verbal impact, which is to be quiet, to have kind of, with the voice, the tone of the voice is very important, and the body attitude. So one piece is to train on that, and we used to train for the mountain rescue, head of operation, to be calm when they do the briefing, when they do the debriefing, the kind of style of communication. So that's one very important piece. The second one is to manage your stress, which is linked. So you have to touch the fear, to touch the risk, and then to improve your ability to face that, because if you don't know that, you will be scared facing it. And if you are scared, there is a lot of impact on your team. So it's one piece on the communication, and I have another idea, but perhaps it will come back. Let's use the floor.
I think that the one additional point is to really, you know, especially what Blaise said, up in the mountains you cannot put a mask. So this is really interesting. So you are as you are, and there is just 100% of authenticity. So you have to learn this to be calm, but then you have just to go to the point also. You don't have time to be certain, try to find, you know, and it's firm, straight to the point and clear. That's very important, that the message, the communication is clear. That's something very, very important, clear and transparent to the point, because the consequences can be too serious actually. Yeah.
And I think maybe another point is also to be sure that your team understand the message.
Exactly.
So maybe we
So it was exactly the point. So
exactly.
What we call in the military language, it's in
Yeah.
French, it's collationner. It's a language on the radio. It's a word, nobody knows this word, collationner. Somebody knows this word in this room? Collationner is to drink and to... No, it's not a collation, but in fact collationner in the radio language is to, when you receive the message, you reformulate the message. So one piece of clarity is to ask to the other one, so I tell you something and you tell me back what you understood of my message. So it's collationner in the military language. So, but it's a very interesting one because in the business world we don't use too much to use these techniques.
So that's a very important point, because I was talking earlier about my experience on the battlefield. When there has been bombing and you have injured and dead people all around and you have to choose whom to save first. This is a very tricky situation because we heard on TV during the first weeks of COVID crisis that hospitals had to choose whom to focus on and whom not to focus on. This happens every day. When there's a bomb that falls and there's 100 injured people and only 10 ambulances, you have to choose which 10 bodies are going first in an ambulance. And so you have very few questions to ask. And any beginner lifesaver is taught those very simple questions to ask. Actually, the first questions you ask yourself, it's visualization. Is that person dead? If the person is dead, not a priority. It's tough to say, but it's a reality. If the person is injured and has to be moved out very quickly, that's a good question. But if the person cannot be moved out without taking a risk for that person's life, then not a priority. You prioritize those you can save. Those you cannot save because they're dead, or those you're not sure you can save are not a priority. And this is tough to hear, but it's a reality. Because if you prioritize the wrong person, there's a third person that will die. And very few questions. And when you ask a question to someone who's injured, you ask very simple questions and you expect very simple answers. So that means that in your question there's already the answer because that person is not lucid enough to understand the complicated questions. Which takes me to situations, again, agencies face. When we sit in front of clients, or when we sit in a business situation, and we have to move fast, we have to generate a decision, we have to make sure that everybody understands the same story in the room, because this is feedback we're collecting, and then the teams will separate and work. You need to make sure that you don't just think you understand, you understand. So if you tell me something, my interpretation is not enough. I have to tell you what I understood, to double check that my understanding is what you wanted to mean. And as a leader, this is very important because in situations where you cannot fail, if you did not evaluate the situation very robustly, you will find yourself sooner or later in a position of failure, and as we said, or as I said earlier, no mistake. You cannot make mistakes when you have the lives of others in your hands or the future of others in your hands, or you need to minimize mistakes.
I prefer this idea because in fact, when we say no mistake, we put a huge pressure over the team. So I'm sorry also, I'm sorry for you guys, but I fight a little with the panel tonight. But if you say no mistake, it's... Of course we know that when you are at the top of Everest, it's no mistake story. of course. But if you put too much pressure over the no mistake, in fact, you will do mistake. So by this system of our brain, it's the way that we manage understanding of the situation. So when you increase a little the pressure, you increase the level of mistakes. So it's one piece of thinking. And what I used to say, what I would try to say to a steering committee, for example, it's better to try to find, to build the ecosystem, to build the proper decision, the less worse decision. Because you have the freedom in your team to say, I disagree with you, boss, you are the CEO of the company, but it's more a question of culture to open the capacity of the team to say to the boss, you're wrong. From you to your husband, you're wrong. Because he's a big expert, but one day you will do a mistake. And you will see the mistake perhaps better than him. So how we built such organization able to open the field to the complexity, to the understanding, and sometimes it's a young trainee coming from the last 2 weeks in the company, but we have a very good idea to rebalance the risk.
And that's maybe a point I just want to jump in. Charlotte really raised a good point, is that it seems obvious you have a team around you when you're a leader, but actually the team makes the leader. And for this you have to work, and wherever the environment you are, without the team you cannot lead, so you are not a leader. So you need the right person at the right place with the right expertise, and that's exactly what just you said. The team is so important, and sometimes some of the leaders are just forgetting that it's thanks to the team that they are able to take the right decisions, because they have the experts around them.
Yeah, Lance Armstrong used to say there's no I in team. And whether we like him or not, it's true. So you spoke about steering committee earlier. We have a steering committee here in the agency, and we have a specialist of disagreeing with whatever the steering is. Vincent, I'm looking at you. The way we work here, and I've seen it when I worked with Yves at Gégère-Lecoultre as well, there was a comité de pilotage, and it was important that people disagree and that people speak up. Very often it was Yves speaking up. It's very important, because otherwise we end up following one line, and that one line might be wrong. And so I'm contradicting myself in a way here, because we're talking about leader in the beginning, but leadership is the fruit of all the ideas of a team. And if the team feels that there's only one line that will be followed and never any other, they won't contribute anymore. If you let the team contribute, if you let the team help you become a stronger leader, then they will follow you. But they will follow you because they know that you know what to do with their ideas, and you know how to make them richer, stronger with them. And so a culture of this is the opposite of the culture of fear, is the opposite of the culture patriarchal that a lot of companies had until a few years ago. It's that culture of inclusion and the culture of building on each other's strengths. And in a Corday, that's very important, because we all have a role.
There is a big question of the culture. What you mentioned, I come back from US just last week. I was in Colorado, and there is a huge culture of inclusion in US. Really, the big difference. No, okay, no, it's political one. In Colorado, it's a very positive aspect of this state. I don't talk about US globally, but in this state, it's a big culture on that point. And when you look at uncertainty, we need to have also different cultural approach to an issue, even with dogs. But you can look, we need to, we are almost the same color tonight, almost the same culture more or less. It's one big piece of mistake, because we approach things, because we have the same background and so on, so we have to open that up too. I don't have any solution, but inclusion inside top level executive board is very important too. That was my
Maybe
small contribution.
what I suggest is that we open the floor to questions.
Yeah, sure.
We only had one so far, or maybe two. So please feel free to ask Emer.
To add your personal view on
Yes.
this question, because it's...
Contribute, please, to this conversation de refuge.
It's not really a contribution, it's more of a question, and it springs out of what you mentioned on say when you were only 50 metres away from the summit. We've talked a lot about being in the moment of crisis and what to do, but I'm actually quite curious, is there anything that you can share with us to help create a mindset in how you then manage, I would imagine, the inevitable disappointment that there is when something like that doesn't come to fruition, or when something goes very wrong? You mentioned about debriefing at the end of the day, but is there anything else to add specifically about how you can help a team overcome the long-term, perhaps, effects of big crisis?
I think it's exactly what you said. Mindset is the key word actually in this. And as a leader, you just have to, you have to prepare also your team that maybe you will not succeed, but you're still a team. You will have to fight then to come back. So it's not finished. So when we were deciding that at 150 meters from the summit we turn back, of course there is a disappointment, but you don't have the time to think of disappointment, because you have a success in the other way. It's that you're alive and you're going to come without anything frozen. So finally there is always something to take positively out of something. So I think this is really the mindset is a key, is that to try to take everything what you can to turn it as a positive situation, whatever happens. If it's not this, then it will be this, or it can be this. And you can make it come out that finally turns motivating for everybody. So it's really, the mindset is super important.
Okay, you mentioned positivity within the mindset. Are there any other sort of common traits that create that mindset? Do you know what I mean? What creates that mindset? Or what's the recipe for that mindset? Do you have one?
Personally, I think it's your personal attitude, is to be ready to face that maybe. When personally, when I'm going for an 8,000 meter peak, I know that if I have the chance to reach the summit, it's like the cherry on the cake. And you have to be ready for this. And that means that you have to go step by step. Okay, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, you know how you are, and you have to adapt. And as we said before, you have to be flexible in every part, in every phases of the situation. Whether you are in the war, you are in a rescue, you are in an earthquake, it is so unpredictable that you have to adapt all the time to the situation. And this makes it's your attitude actually. If you let yourself go down from the situation, then of course you will not be able to jump on the next opportunity to come out in a more positive way. So I would say it's really an attitude to have.
And I think it's also about what you said before, like how can I figure out what will be the summit? So I'm very ambitious, I dream big, but in parallel I also celebrate baby steps, and I celebrate every small victories. And I think it's important, like how to deal with it. Like we're going to be the first vendor of this, I don't know, IT services, blah blah blah. But then we just managed to do it. So I think and in mountain it's exactly the same, like step by step. And during the earthquake, it's the same. When you do a race on a ride, it's step by step all the time. And in your business life, it's step by step. But in 10 years, where we're going to be? I don't know, but I'm thinking about it as well. So
you're saying reevaluate success on the way, and what you may have considered as the criteria for success in the beginning might evolve while you're walking and become something different. Because the weather means that you won't reach the summit, but the success is coming back with all your fingers and coming back. Punto basta.
But at the beginning, it's important that you have a vision, that you have a goal, that you have, this, of course, this has to be there. But then you have to be able to adapt to the circumstances. That's for sure. Yeah.
And the turn back is an option from the early beginning. Because if you look at the big story of rescue, perhaps you remember, for some of you who know a little about mountain, French climber René de Maison was in the Grand Jura's North Face, It was just 80 meters below the summit. And then it was after 11 days in the North Face, sleeping in the sleeping bag by 30 degrees below zero and so on and so on. It's very hard in February 1971, a very famous book, 342 hours in the Grand Joras. Perhaps you have read this book. And in fact, they stopped just 80 meters below the summit. It was just after 11 days. And then his partner, Bousseau, prénom, de maison, Serge Bousseau, so his partner, was just exhausted, unable to move up. But René de Maison was unable to ask the rescue. And the helicopter go just close to nose to René de Maison.
And he did the why, right?
No, he didn't ask for the rescue at this time. He didn't do the regular sign to ask the rescue at this moment, because he was unable to imagine to turn back. He was this dream of his life to succeed, to say to Chamonix, I am the king, the ballet, and so on. And then he was unable to look at his partner with the hand totally frozen, unable to climb, and he was unable to say help.
So
Because in his mindset, to succeed, you need to have the summit as a goal, as a kind of focus, as a competitor, and at the same time, you have to still open the turn back box. Not
So you're talking about ego.
Yeah, a lot of that, but I am in the same situation.
Male
Don't worry. A lot of ego. Yeah, male
We can
ego.
talk about this now.
No, of course, male ego.
At a certain point you need ego, because otherwise you wouldn't go so far. But it's a matter of balance, actually. Everything is a matter of balance.
And what you mentioned about weaknesses, I think is also very important in our business daily life. Like it's, how can we do our own swap? Not all the time, but regularly. Like what are my strengths, weaknesses, blah, 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 like a swap. And I think it's also important. When you do mountain, you do it all the time. You don't know that you do it, but you do it all the time. And yeah, in business, I think it's crucial.
You and your team.
Yeah. Yeah, and your team, yeah, not just myself with my big...
Because sometimes the leader
ego.
thinks that
Yeah.
everything is perfect, okay? And then nobody is
No,
in the
not
back. There is 30% of the burnout on the left, and so on. So we have to observe what happens around, and it's yeah.
Okay. More questions?
I have one. So, you talk about leadership, and a part of that it's hard for many people about that is how do you manage performance, and especially underperformance. And there are many human factors around that, but especially for you, when you have a team that the mistake is very costly. What is it that you accept? What is it that you don't accept? What are the blockers? What's your thought process when you evaluate somebody, and what do you do based on underperformance?
You need to build the team, not to build to face the situation. To build the team, the mountain rescue team.
To manage the team, and not only the first time, but over time.
Yeah.
To maintain.
Yeah, sure. So in fact, we are lucky because we are a governmental organization with no profit to build. So we are a center of cost. So we can do what we want with the money of the country. No, I'm teasing. But we have time, so we do at minimum 30 to 50% of our time is training, art training. So we used to say this formula in French, entraînement difficile, guerre facile. You know this sentence? Training hard, war easy. It's not so perfect. But you understand.
Train now, summit later.
Yeah. So in fact, we have a lot of time to train. And then we have a huge process of selection to move up from a very low level at the beginning to be head of the rope team as a climber first for 2-3 years. Then we have selection to enter in the mountain rescue unit. And you have 1 year of training to become a basic rescuer. Then 3 years of practice, and you can be a chief of operation to manage a team of 5. So you see, it's a very long, so it's 7 to 8 years, and then they go to the mountain guide training. And they are mountain guide plus all these things. So we face all these questions with a very high level of individual skills and a lot of collective training. We do every week, we have training to do a rescue in the crevasse, to winch with helicopter, and so on. So So it's when I say at the beginning that we are a cost of we are a center of cost. It's a big difference with the company. You have to balance the investment on training, on skills, on HR, and so on, and the performance of the team. So you cannot say, okay, now we stop the company for 3 months and we do training. It's not possible. So it's very hard in the companies. It's what we do with Mountain Pass, so the small structure we created, and we want to do something with Andrea and Charlotte too. It's how we can transfer some piece of that to different companies and to say, okay, what are the essentials to build this performance team? And there is, I think, and I hope it's true, because we have done that for the last 5 years with a lot of steering committees, there is some essentials to respect if you want to build in your company such a team. It's possible, it's totally possible.
I think I have an idea to jump in.
Okay.
We should take all the leaders up very high in the altitude, because then the mistake, if you make a mistake, then with your team, you might even lose lives. So not only cost or material, but then even life. So that makes you think then on focus on exactly what he said, the preparation of your team. Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact also that you need to face with your team. When you are in the mountain, you need people around you, whatever you are. Even a mountain guide. We have a big issue, perhaps more in France than in Switzerland, with mountain guide style. Because if you look at the style of guiding, you are, after God, there is guide. Or I don't know, perhaps it's the opposite. But in fact, we think that we are perfect, no mistake, I'm a strong mountain guide, I'll never fall down. So, no, it's bullshit. So in fact, we have also to adapt our mindset about the fact that we are not mountain guides as a leader of everything. But in fact, it's amazing when you are a guide, a mountain guide, people come to you, you never know them before, you check the hand, you go to the Mont Blanc and they trust you. But if you know, but in fact they trust you because there is a title mountain guide.
Yes, but then develop that point for a second. One thing you told me when the first time we went on a hike, the key skill of a mountain guide is being able to evaluate the people in front of you whom you didn't know 5 minutes ago in 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So, if you could talk a little bit about this.
Like a headhunter.
Yeah, sure. I think it's exactly the same. We are headhunters. We do the same job. Because in a few minutes you have to understand what is the strength and the weakness of people. And then you have, after that, to adapt your style of guiding. And even if they come with a dream of Everest, you will manage the dream to achieve their real dream, which is perhaps Jura Hill in the back. But it has to be something successful for them to climb the Jura Hill as a dream. So it's a lot of, you see, so sometimes it's hard because they really want to achieve the Everest, and you say, okay, but it will be very hard to achieve together. So perhaps never.
It means that maybe as a CEO, your dream is not the dream of your team members, and you have to be happy for them, even if you know. So
the dream of the CEO is never the dream of the employee. Never, never ever. It's the biggest mistake in a company. Never ever, I think.
But where this is interesting is being able to evaluate a situation very quickly. So again, as marketeers, and I'm not talking agency, I'm talking marketeers. A lot of us are marketeers in the room. Sometimes we have to be strong enough in order to evaluate whether the mission that we have been given by a CEO or by a steering committee is realistic or not, and whether we have the funds or the skills or the product to deliver on this. And so this is something that we have to evaluate fast, because very fast we need to give feedback saying yes we can or no we cannot. If we can, we can. Remember what we said earlier, we can, but let's make sure we have the same objective. So you rephrase the objective to make sure you have. If you say we cannot, what can you do, and why can't you do what can't you do? And going back to communication earlier, communication is actually at the center of everything we discussed, because it's when the two of you were on top, there was I guess, very strong non-verbal communication. And it's one question you didn't answer earlier. How much that maybe you will want to develop later, that the non-verbal in a couple that knows each other really well, how important it is, and maybe very few words are necessary for this. So communication is key. Evaluation is key as well, and making sure the others understand, the other members understand the re-evaluated objective maybe, or the objective itself, or what can be achieved and not achieved, is very important. And maybe to wrap up from my side, leadership, again, is not something you can claim, it's something you can earn, and you can earn it by making sure people follow you. And you're not dragging them, they are following you, because them following you will be a push. And when you are pushed, you achieve a lot more than when you are pushing people. It's as simple as this. And accordé, the little experience I've had in the last few winters, when a guide is the only person talking or the only person leading and nobody participates, is not a fun. Is not a fun group.
Because everyone is exhausted.
While accordé, where I remember when we went up with Eric to, he made us promise that we won't give the name of where we went, but it was in Vallée de Trian, so voilà. The stories he was telling and everything he was talking about the summits we were seeing, about that mountain we were climbing, about the quality of snow we had, etc., made that climb that wasn't very difficult at the end a fantastic climb. And the view we had on top, we saw the Mont Blanc, and we saw the Matterhorn, and we saw what we always see. But the way he put together the story and the way he led that cordée was unique and made that day exceptional. Although I think we did less than 1,000 meters that day, and everybody in that group was capable of doing maybe 500 more, if not 1,000 more.
No, it's nice.
So we have the choice between more questions or apéro.
Well done.
No, but
no, perhaps you know an observation. Yeah.
Just one question. I mean, those stories are either life-saving stories or like Gordy, all share the same passion. To translate that in a company is quite different, and especially if you know, in larger companies, you have politics, you have different departments, silos. So how, to the panel in general, not to anyone specific, what would you say? I mean, you do this, you know, you do this kind of coaching. What is the things in real life where you have these kind of highly political environments? It's not like everybody's caring for each other and everybody's trusting each other. Yeah. It's almost in some cases an environment of distrust and being cautious about everything you do. How do you translate still the experience from the mountains into this kind of environment, which is also different kind of hostile?
Of course, it's a very different world.
Can I just build an interesting question? I think the other question is, what is a crisis in a company? Because it's usually very different. So what's a crisis for me might not be your crisis.
Exactly. And I mean, somebody would have to go up to the CEO to really, you know, have a different view, but then sometimes it just stays at your level.
Yeah, or is it about...
Well, perhaps I can let the word to Olivier. I don't know, I don't want to push you, because we did with your steering committee a small action a few weeks ago, that perhaps you can say a few things, but what we try to do, it's to extract from all the things we have said, that there is some essential to respect. For any kind of organization, if you are in a profit, non-profit, state government organization, or whatever, it's the same essential to respect if you want to achieve a summit or to face a crisis. This is two main tracks, we can say. And what we try to do with the steering committee is to first to experiment what is this essential, why it's so important to respect this essential, because if you know that you have to respect this essential in your body, then you say, okay, when I go back to my business, perhaps I have to take care about this point. So first is to understand why these essentials are so important. And there is a few, and I put some in the book, but there is 6 for us, 6 essentials. And then, at the end of the learning expedition on the ground on the mountain, so we come back to the company and we say, okay, now in a half a day, we will look at these 6 essentials, and do you have some proposal on a short and mid-term to reinforce your ability to face or to improve or to achieve a summit? And to answer the question of crisis or not crisis, what you mentioned, for me, crisis, the word crisis, we have a lot of definition about crisis, what is a crisis and so on. There is one backstage to what is the meaning in Greek. It comes from the verb krinein, which is to take a decision. Crisis, the word crisis, comes to the verb krinein, which is to take a decision. So this is one meaning of crisis. It's the time that you cannot postpone any decision. You have to take a decision. So it's good to have this in mind. And my personal definition of crisis, it's when you have to transform your organization to face the event. When you are not able with your regular organization, which is your steering committee, your task force, your business unit, your current organization, to face the event. When you have to move to a crisis mode, which is to create a crisis cell and a lot of action to do. So my definition of crisis is when your organization is unable to face the event with these regular tools of management.
And we've all known the situation 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago, overnight, we had to learn working remotely. We had to learn having team meetings virtually. We had to learn how to make business differently. But to answer specifically your question, this opens a whole different panel, but this is what politicians do all the time. You find the one cause that unites us all, you unite everybody around that one cause or that one topic, and you try to rebuild an esprit de corps around that one thing. Because at the end of the day, we all work for one organization. So if we cannot find at least one common point, then there's a problem in the organization itself. And that's what, unfortunately or fortunately, is called politics, and sometimes is not exactly what we have to do every day in order to produce work. But we've seen it in France recently. I have no idea what it will produce in terms of results, but when we have socialists, extreme left, and Europe Écologie Les Verts coming together and creating a party that is supposed to be united to face Macron. We will see. They found a common point. It's actually a common cause. It's beating Macron, and they came together and they tried to win the elections. We have situations like these in many organizations where everybody decided that the CEO is crap and we want to get rid of the CEO. So they come together. So to finish on something that is not anecdotal and that we can use, sometimes or in many situations, it's really difficult to find a common point. We in communication agencies have this situation where sometimes it's not clear, the brief is not clear, or there's a total contradiction between what market A and market B and market C need. This is a situation where we have to work really hard in order to find this common point, this common cause that unites everyone and that makes everyone work in the same direction. If we can't find it, it means we haven't worked enough. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It always exists. There's always a solution. It just may need a little bit more work in order to find what you and I will have in common in order to grow.
I don't know, Olivier, I don't want to push you too much, but you experiment the fact that we can try to do the link between mountain and business.
To speak of definition, so you know the definition of Churchill of success is to go from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. And I think for management committee today, in a certain time where we are, it's to go from crisis to crisis without losing your enthusiasm. So to train in the high mountain with a corday, I think it's a good way for the team to be able to face so sometimes it's mini crisis, or sometimes it's big crisis. So the definition can be very different, but it's you have to be able together to face crisis. So I think your experience is also a very good way to learn how to face this type of crisis together. that we try to do.
And to try.
I'm just interested in your thoughts. When you're on the battlefield and when you're on top of Everest, amazing, by the way, amazing. Your decisions are life and death decisions, and you have to make a decision and you can't get it wrong. Because if you get it wrong, terrible, terrible things happen. Is there a risk that that can build a culture in a business organisation of fear of making a decision in case it's wrong, fear of innovation, or fear of failure? I guess failure to failure was the comment there. Can it have a negative?
I will give you a quick answer, because I'm sure yours will be more interesting. We had an example recently in the agency. We had 2 pitches back to back. One for a beauty brand and one for an insurance company. We won the first one. A lot of work, and we won. We were lucky, we won. When we started the second one, the first thing I said to the team is, it doesn't matter if we lose this one, but this is what we will need to do in order to win it. So you can push people to their extreme, you can push and ask for no mistakes, you can push and be very demanding, but you have to create that culture of nobody will die if we fail. You know, just be realistic. You're not, you know, in communication agencies, I remember a boss telling me one day, we don't save lives. We're not doctors, we're not researchers, we don't save lives. We create work that will wrap vegetables in a market, when we used to create print ads. So, as a leader, you need to always tell the team, look, there's no culture of fear. There's a culture of objective. It's different from a culture of fear. We do have to fail in order to learn. So that Churchill and many others, there was a very good Nike campaign for the Rugby World Cup years ago that showed rugby players failing on passing the ball over and over and over and over again until it worked on game day. So fail as much as you want until you win on game day. So in the World Championships, I have an objective. It's to finish in front of someone else. I can fail many times before. I'm looking at him. Many times before, as long as that day he will be behind. And he has the same objective. But by sharing this, we de-dramatize. And that's super important.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because I would say up there it's a little bit different. The ambition, you need to have it. The failure, the only failure you could have would be to say that for you it's a failure to turn back and before reaching the objective, which is a kind of failure but a success at the end. And I think up there you need to have some fear. You don't need, you will not be able to make a drama out of it, that's for sure not, but the fear will be your limit. And the fear will be the one that will make you conscious till the end that at that point you have to accept this failure, which is not a failure, but from where you will learn too. So it's a little bit another interpretation, even if at the end is same, is that you haven't reached the summit, maybe, but you're alive. So again, as I said before, and thanks, why you are still alive is that you were maybe a little bit scared that if you go too far, you will just not be here anymore, because you cannot fail in the right word, so sense of the word. So that's, but you are able to go up, that's for sure. But there is a kind of, I would say, a little, the fear has to be there in the mountain somewhere, and I think Les agrees with it. Yeah. Otherwise, it's.
So you're talking about keeping yourself on your toes, and staying awake and staying, feeling that. I knew my answer was going to be different from yours, because this is an answer where we're in a situation where, again, nobody will die of us failing. In a situation high up in the mountain or on a battlefield or when you're rescuing, there's a story from 2 or 3 months ago where the secourist had to decide whether they were going down the crevasse to save that person, because there was a risk that the crevasse was going down the mountain. So you need to decide what is the risk you're taking and how far you're taking it. And you need to always, and if you decide to go, never feel safe. Always be on your toes, because by being on your toes, you will make sure you don't fall asleep. And it's true everywhere, by the way. It's true in organization, in relationships, in sports, in everything. If we forget that we have to constantly be on our toes, it's exhausting, but it's life. If we forget to always be on our toes, we just revert to a comfort mode that slowly but surely, it will sound dramatic, but slowly but surely, it's like falling asleep on the Everest. If we fall asleep, we don't wake up.
And then maybe if I can add, you can have some points that are keeping you awake, you know. It can be in a company where you see suddenly the accountant coming with a terrible budget that makes you an alarm or whatever. And up there, for example, we had from the last part, this 300 last meters that you do on the rig, there were 9 bodies that were still here, close like I'm now sitting with Blaise. And you know, these are small alarms that makes you stay on your toes. And I think in a company it's same. You have always suddenly you have this person coming from that department telling, just by the way, in a coffee, you know, finally.
They can.
Exactly.
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 Yeah, we didn't talk too much tonight, but I think it's too late now. But about intuition, which is at the far end, to go right or left, to go beyond the fear and listen to the fear and so on. It's a question of intuition. So every accident I had in my career of mountain rescue or mountain guide, I always a weak signal I didn't catch before. I was not able to listen to my intuition. So for me, at the far end, when we are talking about decision making, we have to look at that point too, which is not rational, I know, but it's very powerful. But we don't know if it's cognitive bias or intuition. So we have to play with that.
So on those nice words, and yes, it's a big topic. Thank you, Vincent, for reminding us of the importance of the approach.